Hi, my name is Paul Matthew, and you are listening to the digital marketing podcast, Fluid. And today we're talking, with this podcast, we talk with local business owners about how they use and leverage online tools to promote and grow their businesses. And today we have Harley and Roy. They're the duet behind Bigfoot Marketing, LLC. These two have formed a strategic alliance of combining Harley's exceptional cinematography with Roy's marketing insight. So tell me, guys, how this started. What brought this about?
Yeah. You want to start?
Magic. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I was working at AT&T at the time, and we got to talking. As I have plenty of time to talk during an interaction at AT&T, just selling phones.
Mm-hmm.
And he mentioned that he had a business, or that he was editing on his laptop a video for his business.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I do editing. What program do you use? And then we got talking about the software we use and how he's always had this dream of starting a marketing company with integration of video. I do video. So
that's like the perfect thing right there.
Yeah. It is funny how we met. However, it's not a surprise. I don't know how many times things have just intersected in my life where a concept comes up and not enough tools to make it into reality. And the next thing you know, you're bumping into somebody
who has the right tools.
Who has the right tools. Yeah. So that's, it was ironic that I was simply changing out my phone, but in reality, met a guy who, could take us to the next level. My background is in video education, and I have a company called Pro Trainings that is an international company. It trains, believe it or not, CPR first aid rescue through e-learning. And that started back in 2002. My video casting, podcasting, though, from a social aspect, started with iRescue Radio, which was a rescue-oriented podcast where a couple of my colleagues and I would talk about tips and tricks on what to do if you had an emergency at home or on the road. What would you do if a tornado was coming and you had no shelter? Just things that don't fit into a primary curriculum for CPR first aid certification. And then a couple of years later, in 2008, I started Roy on Rescue. It was really kind of a one-man show. It never really had a production group. So it gave me tons of time to figure out the ups, downs, ins and outs, the goods and the bads of self-directed mono videography, a face talking. And so what really became clear to me, though, 1 million views later and a few thousand followers later, was that there's a lot to be had today when a person can tell their story, whether it's audibly or through video, that I don't think businesses are taking advantage of. And then if you can mix that with cinematography, like artwork, you can create something that is extremely interesting to people that need to hear more about certain topics.
Yeah, it's really it's an art and a science when it comes to video marketing.
Yeah.
And balancing between those two can be tricky. So it's great that you two have like both sides of that coin to work with. Now, you have spoken, you're very heavy on producing tons of content. I'm curious, do you guys listen to Gary Vee?
Well, I mean, if you're in marketing, who doesn't, listen to Vaynerchuk? I mean, he has, what's weird about Gary is that Gary started his wine library about the same time Roy and Rescue came in. He was a couple of years earlier than that. Now, what's even more strange is that Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook was maybe a year old?
Yeah.
If that. So when you think about Gary Vaynerchuk starting his marketing, his media, he didn't start that way. He started trying to get his dad's wine shop off the ground and honed his skills. So Gary, though he and I have never met directly, it's been really interesting to watch him because he'll self-admit he's learned his marketing and media by doing it, by growing his dad's business.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes him such a a good person to listen to is the fact that, I mean, there's a lot of motivational speakers and gurus out there, but he's one of the few that is really, he's still doing it. He's still making things happen. He's running a business and he's talking about it. He didn't switch over and be like, well, I did a thing that was successful 10 years ago and now I'm just going to coast off of talking about it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that do that. They do something really impressive and then they just coast off, teaching about that until it becomes outdated, and then that information's not even really relevant anymore.
Right. I think what Gary Vee is doing right is that he's constantly present. So he's kind of putting into practice something that Harley and I talked about, which there's two different, Purple Cow by Seth Godin, the breakdown on story brand, like all of those things seem to be trending topics because somebody writes a book on it. And then everybody reads about it. It becomes a New York Times bestseller for business self-help books. But in reality, if you did a quick history check, people have been telling stories for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Like that's where Bigfoot marketing actually came from, because Bigfoot has always been an intriguing Americana legend, right?
Okay.
But has anybody, there's people that say they've seen him, but has anybody found the nest, the bones, right? Bigfoot, his mate or her mate, and their offspring. Like last time I checked, mammals have to reproduce. So you would think that, you'd see more, right? And yet everybody loves Bigfoot stories. Why?
Because of curiosity.
And a great story.
Yeah.
So every legend really has a great story. So what we say is, content is really important, but it needs to, it still needs to have the essence of storytelling. And so what we're going to try to help people understand is you can put out a ton of content, but if you're doing thousands of pieces of content a month and they're all trash, you get thousands of pieces of trash.
Yeah.
Are you putting out are you saturating with your brand in a helpful, purposeful way? And that's the key. And so what we try to tell people is you can put out a ton of effort. You can be really busy, but if that busy doesn't equate to a lift in your income or whatever your goals are, it doesn't have to be income, but whatever those goals are, then it's probably kind of a waste of time. But if you're doing that work and it's actually seeing lift, do more of it.
And how would you start to define, like, if a business owner was trying to put out content, how would they evaluate whether they are putting out trash or putting out good content? What are some of the ways they can measure that or reevaluate what they're doing?
Yeah, it's views, right?
Views, there's insight tools that you can look at on Facebook to see what demographics are watching your content. So I think that's the best way, is having access to that, looking at that, reviewing, adjusting your content accordingly.
Yeah, and I would take it even a step further than that, interactions. So a lot of times, and I've said this for years, I've been in business since the 90s, and I haven't really harnessed digital media until 2002 and beyond. But visualizations only mean like a small percentage to me, because I can buy an ad and Facebook can tell me that it's been seen 800 times in the last day. And my dopamine release is really low.
Yeah.
Right? That'd be like saying, well, your billboard is up and there's 100,000 cars that go past it in a 24-hour period.
But how many sales did you get?
Yeah, nobody called. Right? Nobody reached out and emailed me and asked for help, or nobody interacted with that. And so it's actually quite non-exciting to me. Now, some people do get a dopamine lift on views or on clicks. But when you've paid millions of dollars to a place like Google and Yahoo and Bing, and for window shoppers are fun to talk to, but if they don't buy from you, you still go broke.
Yeah, it's vanity metrics.
It's vanity metrics. Yeah. And so I guess if I was a narcissist and just wanted to think, this is how many people are looking at me every day, but not interacting, okay. But is it actually accomplishing the goal?
Exactly.
So my advice to people that are wondering if their efforts are doing anything is not even necessarily on how many people are actually clicking or how many people. It depends on what their goals are. It's more about, are they getting an interaction is that interaction actually converting to whatever their goal is? If they're not trying to sell anything, they're just trying to get more word of mouth, then they should be asking, did you like that enough to share it with somebody? And that's why we always have, hey, if you liked it, subscribe or share, right? Because we want to know that they're enjoying it, they're liking it, they're engaging with it. So if a customer is producing stuff and let's say it's getting views but no feedback, even negative feedback, then we would have to question the strategy on, is that content pertinent, or do we need to change it a bit?
But how many views would you say you need to really measure that? Because if you get maybe 50 people view it and nobody likes it, but if 200 people view it and then a couple of people like it, how many views would you recommend you have before you start to evaluate, okay, there's no engagement here?
Yeah, well, so that's a very good question, but it's also a complex question.
Yeah.
For instance, if I was a builder of high-end luxury homes and I knew that market really only produced 2 or 3 homes a year, or maybe every couple of years, then I would probably know that my target pool is also probably very strategic and very surgical. So to that individual, then the quantity of views when they're talking about a particular, super like specialized subject matter is going to be different than if somebody, say a car salesman, is looking at, look, I've got hundreds of thousands of prospective clients in West Michigan that could want what I'm selling. So it kind of depends. So if someone were to ask me that question, I would say, well, that's a good question, but it kind of depends. Who are you? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And who's your target market? Then you go to the next statistic, though, that we all kind of know when it comes to SEM and SEO, and that is, well, if I'm going to start judging percentages, like with the art of sales, a person also still has to kind of find out their formula. When I talk to X number of people and I actually get to tell them my story, what then percentage actually says, hey, I'm interested in that, right? And now you get your formula.
Yeah.
For every 10 I tell my story to or pitch to, 1 will respond, right? So that means if I want to talk to 10, I've got to do 100. So I think it's also very similar in video or digital marketing as well.
Exactly.
When you find out who your target market is and then you start to learn their behaviors, because many of them might be voyeuristic. Hey, I'm just a subscriber. I'm just a consumer. Like, I rarely ever actually contact you or give you a piece of my mind. But man, I'm like, when's your next piece coming out? Because I'm a consumer. Like, I want to know more and more and more and more and more.
And if they have a friend who
Bingo.
is in the market for
so
our
you want to
services,
get
they'll word of mouth.
Yeah.
So you want to get like people following you, even if they're not converting, because they might know somebody that could convert.
Well, and the beauty of following is, we know now that they're engaging, right? They're addicted enough to this content. I actually followed you. Because like on a podcast that I put out before, a vlog in this case, one video shot poorly is now at 1 million views. I only have like 4,000 subscribers.
Yeah, and that's the thing with like production value. Like, you get production value, it looks nicer, but that's really not important. You could just have a cell phone type video, as long as the audio is reasonably good.
Correct.
Then you could do well if you have the story, as you talked about earlier. And
Yeah.
that's the element that you need, not high production.
Well, and you bring up a really good point. So many of our prospective clients are probably not getting started because they're afraid that they don't have the money to invest in the equipment. They don't have the wherewithal to produce the content. And then they're sitting on like 40 years of expertise that's just like trapped inside of them that they can't get out, right?
Yeah.
And we can talk about coaching and having somebody help you unlock Pandora's box of your expertise in a minute. But when it comes to that, one of the mantras that Harley and I have is, you probably should always lead with your best foot on intro. Like, hey, I'm Roy. Like, if I came to you and was like in, I don't know, ripped up board shorts and what have you, and didn't have anything to kind of set the pace of my level of professionalism or my success rate, you could form a brand stain right? That kind of leaves you going, not so sure. And then he puts out content that's kind of half-cocked. Boy, that audio is good, though. Well, you can do that with a $50 microphone from Rode, right? So, I mean, so there, yes, that is true, but I kind of bat that back a little bit that most movie stars get away with looking really poor when they're spotted in the public because people all know how awesome they perform on the big screen.
Yeah.
So they've got all kinds of brand equity that they can spare, right? So if you see them out of costume, not looking good, unshaved, maybe a little overweight, you're like, yeah, boy, they've been better.
They clean up nice.
Yeah, but boy, did they clean up nice. And I loved your movie when you were X, Y, or Z, right?
But what about the people that aren't movie stars, just like the everyday vloggers and whatnot? I mean, I watched a 7-minute video of someone just ranting while they folded their laundry. I was like, why am I watching this? But they were engaging with whatever they were talking about.
The question is, did you come back to them time and time again?
A little bit. It's like a musician, so I watched some of the music videos and stuff, but then it was just like this random vlog. I'm like, what? Folding laundry? Okay.
But they got hooked with the music that they create, so they have that skill.
So they do have that legacy with the content where they clean up nice.
Right, right. So I know I agree with you. Harley and I just had this conversation. We met with a client, and they were like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a little bit older. I'm not sure if I'm going to put out the right stuff. And we said, that you're going to fall prey to number one problem that 99% of the people have. You never get started. And it would be better to start bad and just get started than to not start at all, right? So just flip your camera around, no mic included, maybe even bad lighting. But whatever topic you talk about, think about a topic that that your prospective clients have either asked in the past or ask you on a regular basis that you can share with them that they might not otherwise know. And this happened to be a realtor at the time. And so they could talk about mold problems. They could be talking about curb appeal if they're trying to sell their house, or what to look for in a house or not look for in a house when you're starting the buying process. So it was interesting because they had so much information to share that I think they could have pulled it off by tapping into their deep, rich pool of expertise, and that would have covered over the multitude of sins that their bad production would have had. But a starting out vlogger who wants to be branded as a vlogger per se, right, or a personality or a brand, I still kind of ascribe to the fact that a good spotlight video or a really good trailer teaser, if you're an audio podcaster, that'll take you a long ways when establishing your brand, so that on the chance that you're running and gunning and you just flip something around and do a quickie, you're not losing that brand trust that you're trying to build with them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I really like that perspective that you brought to it, having something of high production value and then saving those expenses on the day-to-day content. Because I think a lot of people fear, it's going to be be expensive and time-consuming to constantly produce high-level content on a daily basis. But if you've got a few assets to leverage, and then you continually make that day-to-day content where you talk about the mold and such stuff. Now, I want to ask you your opinion on organic versus paid reach. So when you're producing this level of content, would you go with paid or organic?
It's all about organic. You need organic growth. But you get that sometimes through paying. So you pay, you get a couple people, and then the word spreads organically. But you have to plant that seed, I feel. It's a mix of both.
Yeah, paid advertising is you're buying attention. The benefits of that, in my experience, is that you can turn the faucet on when you want it. Right? There's enough analytics out there that you can actually find your target market, put together some kind of ad piece or an offering or clickbait, not to use a bad term, but I mean, it could be that, just to get them to come to your landing page. Design a really motivating landing page that tries to get them to convert, and then stick your advertisement in front of them and get their attention. So money buys attention. Organic, I agree with Harley. Organic is king. I mean, because you don't pay for that. I mean, you invest in it, but you don't have to continue to pay. So when you're looking at that net margin, the net margin of your advertising and marketing bill compared to your gross sales and net sales, I hear stories of people that say, I've never paid a dime for PPC ever. And I start drooling.
But what about, like, say, going back to the mold example? So a realtor talks about mold, but they don't have an audience. Maybe, like, if you're talking about something very, very specific and your general audience may not be interested in that information and you may not get really any engagement or views, what if you took that same content and then targeted and paid it to reach that very small demographic that would want to know that information?
So in that regard, I feel like paying is still kind of broad. I know you can adjust the settings to make sure that it's this demographic and this demographic, but if you attach yourself to a community, like on Facebook, there's different groups that are interested and everybody gets together because they want to. When you post a piece of content there, everybody who likes that content already is there. So how many photography or video groups you are part of?
I'm part of a few. I don't remember the exact number, but
when you get updates when people post to those and you read them real quick, throughout your day. At least that's how I do it.
Yeah, like one of those. I'm part of a bride group and stuff. Yep. So when brides post, need a videographer, I'm just like, I'm here.
and then you get, you look at the comments, there's like 105 comments.
Yeah,
of different
and standing out from that is tough.
And those are people who see that content, other videographers, because that's the niche, is they're there for the brides. So if you're into mold, well, you're not into mold. Nobody's into mold.
Some people are into mold, sadly.
If you're into home improvement and home renovation and you're on one of those pages, that is where I would post for sure. Post that content there, and you have all these people who like that, what you have to produce, and they're following you now on other social media platforms.
So instead of paying for that reach, you would recommend finding groups on Facebook.
That has worked for me.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think that's an excellent suggestion.
Yeah, and keep in mind that Harley and I, we make up left and right hemisphere of the Bigfoot brain. So I've come to rely on his more organic social reach. My experience over the last 14 years with pro trainings and being in business is maybe some people will be able to relate a little bit more, and they've got an SEM PPC group within their organization, and they've got a budget for it. If you want to turn that spigot on, there's no better way to turn the spigot on like right now than buy that attention. But it is going to take more discipline to figure out what is my budget, how many actual window shopping clicks can I get that do or don't convert before I'm in the red, and start to manage that analytical curve. Because as you were mentioning earlier, there's going to be a curve on that to find out of how many views that I actually watch it, read it, or spend more than 5 seconds on it, actually click to the next landing page, and then out of those clicks, how many actually will convert, and I get real money for that.
So I just want to ask a question quick.
Yeah.
This is a problem I face when running ads on Facebook. It's very quick diminishing returns. So maybe because I have a very small market, like brides in West Michigan, but you start off and it's like everyone's engaging, and then by like the second day, I think everybody's seen it and no one's even giving it the light of day. What's your opinion on that? What do you see going on there?
First of all, there's lots of different paid advertising. So to just take one channel like Facebook or Instagram or any other types of Twitter, that's a different audience. Like in my opinion, if I'm going to advertise, and we do some paid advertising even for Bigfoot, I'm actually just boosting. It's funny how they named it Boost, because that's kind of really what it is. It's sort of like, I'm going to lay your cover page a little higher on the coffee table. And then passive people are going to flow by and they'll see it more often than they would have had it gotten buried in the stream.
Yeah.
So all they're doing is saying, hey, if you want to spend X amount of dollars, we'll lift your cover page and keep it on the top of the pile longer than it would have been normally. So that's very, very interesting. But the same principles have to apply. Is there something in that advertisement that has a very well marketed strategy that creates interest as soon as they see it, not snow blindness, and then draws them to ask the question, I should probably click on that ad, or I should probably have a call to, actually pull the trigger on that call to action and get a hold of them. But now if other people like yourself are just saying, hey, but I just want my name to be more memorable, that's more passive marketing. Not wrong, but different.
The one I'm running is more of a direct sales. I'm offering a special discount, if you book your wedding before the end of the month, and so that one, it gets engagement, and then I get a lot of leads that first day, and then after that it tapers off.
So I've got two things on that. Number one is that my first question would be, is that the only place that you're doing targeted at paid for advertising?
Right now I just use Facebook for my paid advertising.
Okay, so that doesn't surprise me then. The results of that do not surprise me, just from what I've learned about the market of Facebook. And Facebook meaning, if you look at the demographic of Facebook, I just heard from a millennial just the other day again that said, yeah, most of us aren't really Facebook that much. We just do status updates and kind of catch the news. But, we're doing more Instagram now, or we're doing more, some of the other ones, TikTok and different things. So the technology seasons are changing faster. And so now you're looking at probably 40s and up that are spending more time, and they're probably not getting married necessarily. Now, it doesn't mean that you're not getting a hold of bride's parents necessarily, or maybe people that are getting remarried or things like that. But it still is a very niche kind of a market if that's your only place you're kind of doubling down. Okay. So in my opinion, if we take your anecdote as the model, I would say, well, what are you doing with Google? Are you looking at some key search terms there and spending some money?
Wanting to get into YouTube advertisements because I'm still researching it, but from what I understand, you can look at their search query on Google and then run a relevant video ad no matter what else they're watching. So if, say, a bride looks up wedding videography and then they go and watch The Bachelor on YouTube, and then before they watch that, my wedding video shows up. Have you had experience with YouTube advertising?
Yeah, and I wouldn't discount that, but again, passive awareness branding. In my opinion, I went to that YouTube video because I wanted to watch that YouTube video. I mean, how many of us, that ad pops up and you're like, 5, 4, 3, right? Until you can skip ad, right? Because I didn't go to look at your ad. I went to look at that, and you popped up. And I know that that's the way it works. And so I just kind of zone out for 5 seconds, skip it, move on to the next. It's a very, very rare commercial that actually draws enough of my attention that I'm like, didn't come for the commercial, but I think I'll wait and watch till the end, right? It's very, very rare. So again, not bad for brand awareness. And what I would do is I would build an ad around a 5-second snippet. What can you do to brainstain in 5 seconds or less, and then make it memorable? So name recognition, how to get a hold of you, and do it so that you're brainstaining them, even though they weren't looking for you. That warms up the brain a little bit, the marketing brain of every consumer, to go, I've seen that before. I don't know where I've seen it before, but I've seen it before. And because I've seen it before, I know it. And because I know it, I trust it. And because I trust it, I'll buy it. So it's kind of a strategy leading them to the conversion ultimately. But it may not be the conversion. Again, because your audience is passive, and it's viewing, it's relaxed, it's out there consuming, but not necessarily shopping. So if a person is out of the social media, look, I'm just going to saturate social media digital marketing by putting out lots of content. Now I'm actually going after fish. And I'm going to put the right bait on with the right tackle, and I'm going to catch that fish. That's where you get a strategy for PPC, pay-per-click, where you're literally going in and going, look, I know that on a given day, I can target, and you're more like zeroed into a region, right? I mean, you might travel worldwide to do photography, but let's say you wanted to stay within a certain range of zip code. The beauty is you can do that even through Google and through some of the other search engine marketing. But when people are out there using what we now know is the only yellow pages or white pages available, which is Google, right? Most of the time, my experience, and probably a lot of other marketing research would tell you, people are shopping. Like if I'm keywording, need a videographer for my wedding, right? What's in their mind? I'll just play this little exercise with you. What are they thinking right now?
That they are looking for that specific thing that
I'm looking for a videographer.
Yeah.
Like I'm not watching a YouTube video. I'm not watching The Bachelor. I'm not kicking back and chilling and eating Ben and Jerry's and what have you while I'm entertained. I'm shopping for my videographer for my wedding. Okay, now, depending on what your budget is, you get into the top 3 or 4 of the listing of the paid search advertisement returns for that geo-targeted search. Now your Facebook awareness branding videos that you paid with cheap advertising dollars. Now your YouTube advertising, which is fairly cheap as well and could be relevant to warm up your prospect. They've seen you. They've seen you again. They've seen you again and again and again. Now they go out and they're actually shopping and they pull up 5 different returns, and guess who's in that top 3 to 4 lineup?
The one they recognize.
The one that they recognize from other branding.
Yeah.
So your whole brand and persona now is that you're everywhere. So you must be good, right? Because I saw you there, and then I saw you there, and then a friend of mine was talking to you about, on Facebook. So you must be good. And then there's 3 of them they don't even recognize.
Yeah.
Or they're national. They're not even from West Michigan, say. Well, of course they're going to click on you.
Yeah.
Now it's important to have your landing page be correct, make it clear, make sure that they're not lost in everything else that you might be interested in. I mean, they went looking for a videographer for a wedding. So that's when having somebody write good copy and having a very clear landing page and or website
And
that
have your best foot forward.
totally.
Right there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Don't screw them up now.
Yeah.
Right? Like get them in, get them contacted you. If you can't explain it all in a self-serve, then literally I would just go like, I know it's complicated and I know you must have concerns. Call me now.
Yeah.
Text me now. Like don't leave room for doubt. Help them to understand how personable you are and how able to be reached you are and that you're going to be with them the whole way.
One of the strategies I've implemented for landing page optimization and such is I have a video where it's me basically what I call a video business card, and it's me talking about the who, what, why, where, all of that, and then the call to action while showcasing some of the shots I've done on other weddings, and I talk about how I work with a couple, and all that information is presented in a video, and then in a paraphrased in text basically, and then as well as a common questions like things people always ask me. I was just like, this your question, here's an answer. This your question, and then reviews and such like that. Is there anything I'm missing from that?
Where are they landing on that from?
So it's linked to Facebook. So they see the ad, they click on it, and they go to that landing page.
So that would be the thing that I would encourage you to re-examine is where in the funnel is this popping in? It's not wrong. It just might be maybe not in the best place. So if you believe and you're getting results and people are like, yeah, it was because of that virtual business card is why I'm talking to you right now, well, it's probably working, especially if it's serial and it's repeating, right? But if you're still not completely happy with the results and you're like, yeah, they're clicking on my business card, but like kind of poor results, it could be because that's more FAQ. Like that's kind of like the About Us page. In my opinion, that's more like about the About Us page. And so kind of getting some more information, like being able to figure out, when you clicked and you saw, where were you in that buying process? See, now we're diving more into the deeper bowels of marketing psyche now, right? The psyche of the buyer. And it gets crazy, which is cool. It's fun, but it's way crazier than like digital content, media penetration, branding, right? Now we're getting into psychoanalysis, marketing analysis, buying analysis, what caused them to click. And that's where like my team literally puts up different softwares to watch the actions. We actually have that opt-in software that watches the person as they're scanning over a landing page, seeing if they're getting confused, seeing if things are confusing them and they're clicking on the wrong things. We've actually hired mystery shoppers before to go through our process from landing page through to conversion, and where they actually audio record themselves going, yeah, so I'm looking at this, but I'm lost. Like, I don't really see where your phone number's at. And, oh, okay, so this was helpful. You put a video of your last shot that you did for a wedding. That was really helpful. That made me feel like I was confident that your quality, that you're in touch with the bride and groom. Fantastic. But how do I buy it now? Like, I'm stuck in your video, and after it stops playing, I'm kind of out there on YouTube somewhere. I'm on a video player, and yet I don't see a like return to home or contact me now or schedule your appointment or whatever. So actually putting a little bit of money in there, which is not as expensive as one might think, you can crowdsource to have people go through your funnel or your algorithm of buying process and see, where are my leads getting locked up? Like, where are they getting stuck and lost? And that gets into more like UX of the sales funnel. Like, what is the interface like? But again, you can easily outsource that. There's lots of talent out there. It's not absolute rocket science, but it does take time to do that. But that's kind of the breadcrumb trail from, ooh, I like what I see and I want to engage in that somehow, but I'm not ready to buy yet. And then there's the trail, right? So that's what I always encourage people to do is if they've got a sales process, they need to have some people maybe help them if they're not already experts in that area, help them through engineering their process to get them from, I found you and now I'm going to buy from you. And that can be a little more complicated. But when it comes to purely getting your brand out, your name, your wares, that's where we circle back around to saying, what are you giving your audience for free? So
the jab, right hook.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, if you want to use Gary Vee, I mean, he has virtually defined what every natural human should know. If you're only telling me something because there's something in it for you, none of us are stupid. I mean, you could have guised that somehow, right? But if you're putting this podcast out, and you're literally out here helping people build their marketing strategies, and no hooks included, you'll become a brand that they trust, clearly. And so now it's really more fun because now the creator of that content can circle back and go, what am I really good at? You know, in Harley, he's like, I'm really artistic. I'm really, I can see things when I'm, shooting video. And so he can speak to that, but who's his target market? Probably not the buyer of our marketing services. Probably a videographer or a photographer or somebody who's doing vlogging and wants to have the edge on how to get a more professional look. So it's very important that whoever that audience is that's consuming your content, we're building content that scratches their itch. That's my opinion, is that we're just not producing enough content for free that scratches the itch. And I understand why, because not a lot of business people are in a position that they can afford to do that. We're not sitting on having grants and funding from the Fed Gov or from somebody else who's like, hey, you've got a year to build 1,000 pieces of content. Here's your pay. You don't have to make any money on it. And I think that's, we've talked about that, Harley. That's where the friction line starts. Is like, yeah, I know, I'm supposed to produce this for free, like no hooks attached. And how am I going to make my mortgage payment? Like, where am I going to buy my groceries? And so it can become very tricky. And that's when I think if you can partner alongside somebody who helps grease the skids of getting that video production going for you, what I tell people is, if we can teach you how to do this so that it's sustainable, scalable, and it actually does what you want it to do, look at it as like flossing your teeth. It's cathartic. Because who is an expert that doesn't like to talk about what they're really good at?
Yeah. Everyone loves to talk about their area of expertise or about about themselves.
And almost everybody loves helping somebody.
Yeah.
No strings attached.
Yeah.
It's just that not everybody can afford to do that all the time.
And people, I think a lot of it is just being self-conscious, and people are afraid to put themselves out there and be all over online. And I know I can think of a few people off the top of my head that are very informed. They know what they want to do. They just don't want to go in front of camera. Like, I have all this stuff. I'd love to share it. I'd love to help people, but I don't want to be in front of a camera. Mm-hmm. What's your advice for people like that?
Don't be.
Okay.
I mean, if the old joke is, yeah, I got into show business because I've always been told I had a face for radio. Sometimes that's true.
Yeah.
Like, if for whatever reason I felt like I was sabotaging my brand by getting in front of a camera, then I probably should get in front of a mic. Mm-hmm. Or Seth Godin, what's his primary medium?
I'm not familiar with it.
So Seth Godin is more my age group, but he's a marketing guru, and he put out books like Purple Cow and many, many others. So there's like 19 books that have all been bestsellers. But he gives insight in regards to marketing and branding and sales, and his number one, other than when he gives keynote talks and things, is writing.
Yeah.
And if you subscribe to his email that comes, number one, it's ferociously a huge amount of content. I mean, I've almost unsubscribed sometimes because there's just so much. But that's because he's such a prolific writer, right? But because the gems are so good and so encouraging, I leave it, which is good on him, right? He's doing the right thing. But he obviously doesn't like to do vlogs, and for whatever reason, he didn't want to get in front of a microphone most of the time, even though he does do talks and is recorded. So he writes. So what I try to help people understand is we've got lots of mediums for producing. And there's markets who like to read more than watch. There's markets who like to watch more than read and hear. And then there's people who like to hear and they don't really care about watching. So if your target market is readers, like maybe a lawyer or a doctor, and they know that a lot of people read in that industry, and that's not fair, I'm kind of keyholing that market, which is not fair. I would say, hey, look, and you don't feel comfortable and you don't want to videotape, start writing. Right? Start writing and write a lot, but make sure it's pertinent information that people want to consume. If you think that your people are audio, you can actually record a video. It's easy to upload to YouTube, and half the time people are using that as the new form of MP3 anyway.
Yeah, I mean, this is how I distribute this podcast. I film it and I put it on. I put the full version on YouTube, and then I put the audio version on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and then I also segment all the little golden nuggets as just short videos that I put on Facebook. Right. So that's kind of how I make a lot of content out of a single piece.
Bingo. Yeah. No, that's very smart. I encourage that 100%. So there's my knee-jerk. I only had 5 seconds to 10 seconds to tell you when you're telling me I don't want to videotape, and yet you want to do content. I don't even fight. I just say, then don't. Then write it. Yeah. And if you don't want to write it, then record it and put it on a podcast. Now here's my not longer, but it's my deeper dive. I bet you're better at it than you think. Everybody starts bad. Yeah. There's rarely a person who can start recording and not feel self-conscious or, shoot, man, I've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos out. I still am self-conscious about my videos. I was self-conscious about my irritated eyes today when I met you. Yeah. Right? I'm very self-aware. And so people that are self-aware, especially those who image is a big thing, I think, in their line of work, that's a very, very common self-sabotaging thing. I'm not going to put out work that's good enough, and so I just won't. I'd rather not start than to start badly and give a bad impression. And so that's why I say there's help out there. Don't do it alone. But it's easier than you think, too.
And partner with talented people like Harley over here.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and Harley's helped people with free advice and giving a hand. It's not always expensive. And I think that's the thing that Bigfoot Marketing is trying to show people is, yeah, could we put, stuff together for tens of thousands of dollars? Yeah, we could, and we have. But do we have to? No, absolutely not. You'd be surprised how small a budget you can have and still get good work done. In fact, we're in the process right now of building some self-help things to help people learn a little bit of a tutorial on how to do it themselves. Is it going to look, like top-notch professional if they don't have the right equipment or the right know-how? Probably not, but I bet they can do something good enough and make up for it in the value of the content.
So we're just about out of time. I want to ask one more question before we wrap this up. So you guys are new to the market. You just started maybe, a few months ago?
About a year ago.
About a year ago.
Yeah, but we kind of delayed our launch.
Gotcha. So what are some of the ways you are getting the word out? How are you marketing yourself?
You want to touch your piece first, and then I'll...
Well, kind of just like I spoke about it earlier, reaching out to the audience that I've already built just by having my current Facebook, right? I've built up followers, just they're really good friends, they're family, reaching out to them, reaching out to just all of them at once, right? Just making nice posts, creating content that they're interested in and going to those Facebook pages. That's so far what we've done, and we've created a few different pieces of content that we have done Facebook advertising for, and we're working on the Google right now, but that's what I've done so far.
Yeah, and Bigfoot is a bit of an anomaly. It's a project that I'm starting in the second half of my life, and I still have 4 other businesses. And so Harley's been good in that he's been patient and is also successful in his work, where Bigfoot is kind of a fun project for us. And so unlike when I started pro trainings and pro CPR back in 2002, where I had to feed my kids and provide for my family, this one is a little bit different in that we can strategically open and shut the valve of activity. And so one thing that Harley and I have both agreed to do is be very purposeful and strategic about when we open that valve, let's be ready so that we can handle the amount of activity that comes in. Let's not overcommit and under-deliver. And so we literally, for the first time in my life, we're holding reins. Like the practices that we encourage people to do, we literally go, and we're going to hold on that channel, we're going to hold on that channel, we're going to limit this, and then be very careful and strategic about how we release it. And more because of my limitations with so many things that I'm involved in. On the positive side, that allows us to be extremely purposeful when we do talk to a client. And so we have to vet who it is we talk with. That's why we're really eager for this next phase where we're going to put together a series of videos on how to help that we can then put into the channel that people can dip into when it's best for them, not best for us.
And that's the goal, because this is a passion project.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
We each have our own separate businesses that are very successful, and we want to help others have that same success. So that is what this is. And, once people see that and we build that as our brand, then we've helped people and we've succeeded, because that's the goal.
But all of the same practices we just talked about are being implemented. It's just that we are not in a position where we have to probably take the lid off Pandora's box quite as fast as some other businesses have to. But there's a little catchphrase I usually say, and that's most businesses can be barbers with bad haircuts. And what that means is it's like the doctor who smokes or is overweight. It's like the beautician or the barber who doesn't have a good haircut, right? Sometimes we can't practice what we preach ourselves. And so our mantra is not to do that. If we're going to teach that to a client, we better be doing it ourselves. And so this has been a lot of fun, self-examining our own practices and saying, hey, if we're going to teach that that's best practice, we had better either implement it ourselves or be implementing it ourselves. So that's been a lot of fun too.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys coming on the show and talking about this. This was very insightful, and I think a lot of people will get some extreme value out of this conversation. Again, this is Fluid Podcast. This is Harley and Roy, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.